Ooh, I got one. Repetition builds tension. Having that, like some kind of like static part with maybe some deviation, some little fills and licks to like give the ear a break from listening to exactly the same thing. But having one element that's essentially the same throughout and then just slowly transforming the other parts.
Increasing the pace at like the subdivisions that you're hearing, slowly opening the hi-hat, and kind of quickness and pace. If you look at like a typical electronic build up the kick drum, right? Boom, 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 boom. That's a very easy way to create tension or create the sense that something is going to happen.
So another thing that I think is really fun, I use like pick scrapes a lot as transitional effects in different parts of songs. So kind of like an uplifter or riser would be used. I'll do that on my guitar to emphasize like a dramatic effect at transitions.
You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
My name is Brennan Forster. I was born in Martin, Tennessee.
I'm JJ Evanoff, and I was born out in Ohio, Columbus, to be exact.
My name is Jacob Dorval Hall, and I was born in Newburyport, Massachusetts.
So now we have your origin location. Zoom forward to before joining or starting Evanoff. How did you get into music? What was that transition like, those early days?
Yeah, so for me, growing up in Tennessee, my family was pretty heavily involved with the church, and also being from Tennessee, huge fans of music. So they were really supportive and got me into some piano lessons when I was pretty young that didn't quite take. Piano wasn't that cool, right? Guitar and drums got the chicks. So I started playing that in like middle school. Towards the end of high school, I was pretty determined that I wanted to be a drummer. And then as I was studying to go to college at CU in Denver, I just fell in love with the piano again. So that became my primary instrument and took up, all of my time since.
Let's see. I got started at a pretty young age. I was very fortunate that I showed some promise in guitar when I was around like 9, and my parents put a lot of support into me getting lessons and really taking that seriously. So I performed in my 5th grade talent show when I was in elementary school. And that was kind of a key moment in me realizing I wanted to be a performer, because I got like a big standing ovation. And all my friends like came up on stage and like picked me up, carried me out of the gym. It's definitely a memorable childhood memory. And then in middle school, I was part of the School of Rock when I was down in Dallas, Texas. And I was part of the Texas like All-Star School of Rock. So we actually went on tour around Texas playing shows when I was in like 8th grade. And then I was really fortunate to go to the high school I went to, which was the top arts high school in Colorado. And so I got the chance to be on stage a lot, got to be a part of a lot of big theater productions and variety shows, and played in the pit band for some stuff. And that kind of led to me deciding I wanted to go to music school. And I went to music school at CU Denver and started producing electronic music. And then I met these two wonderful people, and the rest is history.
Aww. Well, let's see. I came out of the womb just ready to bang on shit. My first experiences with drums were actually like pots and pans on the floor in my childhood kitchen. And then I think it was when I was 4 or 5, we found a snare drum in a trash can, and that's when my parents put me in lessons. And so I was really into punk rock and metal and that sort of stuff when I was very young. And I had some friends that were local that were into it too. So I started fooling around with bands there. Then that was probably like 6th grade. And then come 8th grade, I met my buddy Ben Cook and my friend James, who I had been playing with. And Ben's uncle was a very professional musician, had a studio. And so we did a full-length original album. And that was like 6th, 7th grade. Then I went to boarding school and lost my bandmates, which was tough, but it also allowed me to discover music production and electronic music and an outlet for me to be able to create when I was on my own. So I continued doing that, and then had some things that I put on the internet really gained some attention, which made me realize that I was like, okay, this could be something I could do as a career. This is something that is a valuable future. And so I came out here to CU Denver, where I met Brennan first. We were actually roommates in college, and then we lived together for like 7 of the 9 years or 7 of the 11 years that we've been in Colorado. And done plenty of projects. And I wasn't in Evanoff until I graduated. JJ had lost the previous drummer, and Brennan was in class with JJ, recommended me. So I joined the band, and then what was it, 2 years later, Brennan, you came in, and now it's a super fucking tight bond. It's awesome.
Well, I appreciate all of your, like, a little bit taste of your background, and appreciate you sharing that, Jake, about learning production as a result of having to do it all yourself. But now you guys are coming together again and leveraging each other's skill sets. So when you guys are creating a song, anybody could take this, but like, where does it start? What are the first layers, and how do you guys exchange those ideas back and forth?
There's 2 main ways that we write, and they're both pretty different. So one is either I or one of them conceptualize an idea, like in the DAW we use, like whether that's Ableton or Logic, builds out a song form, comes up with an idea, comes to the band, either sends it to us, and then we have a rehearsal, and then we kind of workshop that idea, and then kind of try to put like the Evanoff spin on it. So we start with a composition of kind of what it's already a song, and then we turn it into like a live band version, or what turns into like the Evanoff version of that song. The other way, and how basically our whole last album was written, was by we just jammed in the studio and really just let all these ideas come out naturally. And we recorded all of them, and then we went back through and like picked ones, and we're like, okay, let's develop this one. Then we would spend like hours, days workshopping that song and really building it out. And so it's cool because those are 2 almost like opposite songwriting methods, but we found a nice balance in between them that allows us to merge all the time we like to put into the sound design and electronic side of things, and still letting the organic band improvisational dynamic come out in the rehearsal studio.
And I think to add on to that, one thing you'll notice if you listen to the latest album, you can really hear, like, that one came from jams, and you can kind of hear the beef of the track being the instruments versus the other tunes that we have, the singles like Golden Hour and whatnot. You can hear that the real beef of the track is the electronic elements, and that's like the difference, and that's kind of how we balance our sound out. And I think striking a balance between creating that way and creating the other way is really what gives us our vibe.
Brendan, I saw that little finger. I don't know if that means something else, but
it's a new one for
raise?
me. It's a way of agreeing with someone without like interjecting, right? Without being like, yeah, I agree, and like that's true. So it's just like, yeah, I see you and I agree with you, I guess.
Cool.
They do it a lot in Mexico.
We're all going to Mexico in 2 weeks, so we're learning.
Yeah, it was funny when I was my brother got married in Mexico to a Mexican lady back in the fall, and when her and her friends, we'd all be in group conversations, instead of like interjecting and being like, yeah, and agreeing and doing that thing that we kind of do up here, like, yeah, totally, that's cool, and stuff like that, everybody would just silently just be like this, and that's like a nod of agreement with what the person is saying. It's kind of fun.
Cool.
Yeah, it might not be great for the
culture. Appreciate the culture. Yeah,
The
not
audio
great for the
portion of the
audio
podcast.
podcast. Yeah, but it's all good.
A lot of silence followed by giggles in this one. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, what the hell's going on? Yeah. Well, I would love to transition and talk about a few of your tracks in particular, and get to know a little bit about the creation process for those ones in particular. So, Stare Mesto, if I'm saying that okay. how did that one start? And there's something kind of unique about, in my opinion, the drums as well. Like there's a kick, what I would call a roll on the kick, which is kind of strange. You kind of think of a kick like a roll being a snare or like a hi-hat roll or something, but it almost sounds like it's so quick. Are you
Double kick,
using a double
and it's
double
it's
kick
kind of like a flam, but like kind of like a 30-second note, like impulse into the break. Yeah,
it's a really nice sound. So that's just something unique that kind of stood out to me. But beyond that, I would love to hear about the creation process, and then we'll get into the other elements of the song.
JJ, I might pass this off to you, but to kind of give the backstory a little bit for this one. This was during that few weeks during the pandemic where we were getting together every day in Jake's basement and just letting things flow and recording stuff. So I can't really remember if JJ had played that on the spot, like improvising it that day, or if it was something where we listened to it and then you got inspired when you went home. What was where'd that riff first come from?
This, explaining the song is actually a great way to kind of like showcase the whole kind of creative process of this album. I think this song is a great example for that. So that riff, I remember I was listening to a lot of Polyphia and Chan and really getting into the fucking prog stuff. And so I don't know. I think I wrote that riff when I was just in my room playing around, then came down to the basement, played it, and then you guys just joined in and we started jamming it. So that was one of those instances where it came about really naturally, just from a riff, and then slowly turned into this whole song. So I'm pretty sure we built out the whole kind of instrumental aspect, like all the parts of that. And then we each took that project, like a recording of us, kind of a demo of it in the studio. We all took it to our computers, and then we all each added in different electronic like production elements. And so we each did that on our own, and then they dumped all that stuff back to me, and I put it in kind of the master session in Logic and took out certain parts, kept certain parts each of us did, and that turned into what the kind of hybrid electronic rock song that is. And the monologues at the beginning and end of that was kind of the first song we added the monologues to, which then ended up turning into kind of the prompt and premise for the whole album. Like that, me and Brennan sat down one day at my place and we drank some mezcal, and that's when we kind of turned what Singularity was into a concept album. And that was kind of the first song we started writing little like the phrases and stuff that then turned into this like, I don't know, pages and pages of monologues that then ended up overlaying over the whole album. So Starry Mesa was definitely kind of like the spawning point of what that project turned into.
Yeah, that's great. Well, the lyrics in particular, so who's singing it? Did you guys, you mentioned that you wrote the lyrics, but how did it get to be in audio form? Actually,
shout out to Seth Beamer. He's a buddy of mine that we went to school with, super talented producer and bass player, and plays a lot of instruments, really great musician, right? But he also made a reel for Adult Swim. And I'm not sure how far into that it got, but I ended up seeing it through social media. It's like, oh, cool, how cool is this that Seth is doing voice acting stuff? Later, we were writing this monologue and thinking of people that could do it. So I called him up, and we all went over, sat at his house with the script, played some of the music, and just basically had him go for it. And maybe we would change some of the inflections or the pacing of things, so it kind of had the vibe we were going for. But it was a really fun process working with him, and he knocked it out of the park. And then afterwards, I went through and kind of processed the voice so it sounded a little larger than life.
So when you're writing the lyrics, where were the lyrics coming from? Was it they're technology-centric, Singularity? What was it that you guys are currently pondering? I don't know whether or not you're in a simulation.
I think
or something.
A lot of that kind of came from being in COVID and watching how technology really changed the landscape and was the thing that people were relying on to have a human-to-human connection when there wasn't the ability to see someone in a space. And I think it was us kind of reflecting on that, as well as all the hype around Web3, metaverse stuff, and all that kind of coming together, and how our music in a way reflects the bridging between instrumentation and electronics, and kind of looking at that as a reflection of what's going on with the world, or where the world was at that point in time.
Yeah, for sure. I think we were all, had spent a lot of time on the road, a lot of time indoors, like listening to podcasts, listening to things going on in the news, looking out the window, or like getting sucked into TikTok or Instagram. It seemed like it was just the pivotal moment of everybody being really glued to their phone, really reliant on the technology, which is something that has been, slowly accumulating throughout the past few decades. And now it's at that point where it's just kind of undeniable. We're so attached to these things. It's like an extension of ourselves. So I guess just pondering, is that good? Is that bad? What are the good parts about it, and what are the downsides potentially? And I think there's a lot to be said on both. So we didn't really want to take a hard stance on it, but we wanted to find a way to put those things into the spotlight for other people to consider, without really taking a hard angle on it. So that was kind of the tricky part too. We didn't want to be preachy. Right, it's something that it's important to us, but we don't want to be preachy about it. So we're like, how can we just offer people to consider their relationship with technology as an individual, and then like kind of on a global
encourage
level, and
thought,
what that means for the future. Yeah.
Well, we're certainly at a weird inflection point, a unique one. Obviously, it's a beautiful time to be alive right now, and I imagine no better time than now. But have you guys seen Dali? No. That yet?
Salvador or Dominic?
No. So it's a AI.
Okay, yeah. The generative
it's
art
an AI that takes text and makes
there's a lot of them.
Images. It's pretty interesting, and now they're doing it with video too. I watched a whole music video that was just AI. Anyways,
they're doing it with
wild.
music too. It's pretty wild.
Yeah. I mean, any art form, I suppose, but yeah, the visual one is just pretty stunning. But we're at this weird, interesting point. Obviously, 2020 was just such a odd year for the place that we live, and things really just shut down. Like, you were not supposed to go anywhere. And I remember hearing the birds suddenly, and like also hearing the silence of the cars when everything shut down. So that obviously impacted you. You guys were on tour. You're out there spreading your music. What new strategies did you start to incorporate in that album in particular?
I think this was the first time, like, we kind of laid out having the hybrid where we're writing songs traditionally like a band would, or like a jam band would, improvising things, putting them together in a form, and then just having that couple weeks to imagine how the tracks could be more, and how we could kind of influence, or let some of our other musical tastes influence the music that we were making. And we got pretty weird with it, like it was a weird time where we were in this bubble. So we were able to be creative. We weren't being influenced by a lot else other than what we were choosing to take in for ourselves. So that whole experience of like having a song that's pretty much together, and then instead of it being everyone's task to make a song or make a good song, it's just like, how can we take this thing that's pretty good and make it better? And there was no rules. We were all throwing all kinds of different stuff towards the tracks, and it was really fun to piece together all three of our sounds to make something cohesive and for us new.
Yeah, honestly, looking back, as far as how that period of time changed like the trajectory of where our music was headed, I could not be more grateful. Because what it ended up doing is in a sense, it seems like it made it a little more authentic. Instead of us trying to do a certain thing, all that time we spent in the studio just jamming, and over that year and a half or so, the immense amount of time we spent together playing, I feel like what ended up happening is, like, instead of trying to do something, we let more this kind of like authentic side of the style of music that we create naturally come out. And so through that, this whole album came out. And then through that, we found this hybrid model of writing like a jam band, but then producing it like a DJ, like an electronic producer afterwards. And that kind of hybrid is what turned into where our music has been going since then. I don't know if that would have happened without this downtime from touring.
And I think a lot of our exploration and the way that these songs came about was us really just trying to like let it all out. Like, and it wasn't, we were just like, let's jam, let's like release all the tension and the stress and see what happens. And I mean, like what we cut out of the hours and hours of recording were just these portions that we thought were really keen to our sound and to our style. So it was like, there was a lot of content that we really refined to make this what it is.
When you guys are in the studio and jamming and recording it, obviously there's a lot of ideas that are flowing out, so some of them will stick, some of them won't. Once you have selected some of the ideas that are like worth revisiting, recording, looping, whatever that is, how do you start to layer and then bring it back into the digital realm where then you can fine tune it? So what's the workflow like? Do you separate that different days, or how does that work?
Versus group stuff, I think.
Yeah, it usually goes group, or like that, at least that stuff. Group, like you said, Jake, we lay down all this stuff, then we figure out, kind of build out the song, come down with a structure, and then we bounce out a demo, and then we do a bunch of work individually. So it goes from group to individual production. Then it comes back to, then I usually sort through stuff, and then we do group production sessions to kind of finish off the song. So it's kind of like a 4-step process.
Yeah, and if I could add in, like during that time, we have the group project, and then we all just kind of break out and either go with our inspirations or strengths. So it's like the things that we're all individually hearing that's missing from the song, or we're imagining it being there while we're listening to it. So we would add all those things in. So sometimes I'm adding in additional drum layers. Jake might be working on like a new bass section or a bass tone. Maybe Jake did arps too, and then maybe JJ had some drum stuff. So we're all bringing it back together and kind of combining it. So then that's a whole other process of like throwing everything down in the DAW and then chiseling away and combining different things. And then we would go back and listen to it again, maybe get some other ideas based on, I hadn't heard Jake's bass part. And now that I have, now I'm totally rethinking what I'm going to do with the pads in this section. So it was kind of just a lot of wash, rinse, repeat through the group and individual.
Nice. So when you guys are in a group, you're using one computer. Is that right?
Yep.
And then when you just break out, now you each have a copy of the full project, and then you work on your individual parts.
Or we'll have stems.
So you have three computers.
We'll pass stems back and forth. JJ likes to use Logic. Brendan and I are Ableton guys primarily, even though JJ uses Ableton Live. Logic.
I do. Well, and back to what you said before, when we're performing and we're writing in the studio, we usually have Jake's computer on our mixing board that's recording the feed of what we're working on. But then for all Evanoff performances involve 2 computers. Like I'm running one, which is kind of like the master Ableton set that like triggers all the different scenes and stuff like that. And that is synced wirelessly to Brennan's computer, which is controlling all of his synthesizers and time-based effects and looping stuff.
They're essential parts.
Interesting.
So 3 computers.
They're members of the band. I think we should name them.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
I think we should really take it another step. We'll list them in our bio.
That's great.
Yeah.
Put them in the bio.
Do you know they had a 4-year-old in their band? That's amazing.
And then we past members, all the laptops that die along the way.
I love it, but they are essential. They are essential members. They definitely do a lot. They're not always the most reliable,
really
so it's just like having a bandmate. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Good. Well, so how do you guys think about looping on stage and utilizing those computers and really leveraging everything that they have to offer in the live setting?
Love it. Absolutely love it. I mean, that was one of my focuses before I joined the band. I was really inspired by this group called Iodo and a lot of like Pringzilla, a lot of things that came out of that. I was just enamored with the idea of having no plan, going up there in front of an audience, feeling it out, working it out with them, seeing what works, what doesn't, just like feeling off the room and using crazy sounds and looping. So I tried to replicate that. I will say that shamelessly. I definitely like listened to a lot of their sets and was just like, how the hell is Michael Travis doing this? So I spent a lot of time doing the live looping thing. When I first joined the band, I feel like we exploited that a little bit more. Like we were doing a lot of like live looping jams. And then that ended up going into, we made a side project called Evanoff. So EFFNOFF, where we kind of did that, like a 3-piece all improv show. We've done a couple performances of that.
Have we done?
I think we've done 3.
Black Sky Brewery and Black Box.
Black Box. Oh, okay, so maybe just the 2, but they were really cool. And then in terms of in our set, there's definitely moments where we're open to just like letting the whole thing fly open and just improvising everything, making loops and kind of just doing a free form part of our show. But even if it's not that, we use looping just as part of the structure of our songs. Like very often I need to loop the bass part that I'm doing so I can move to a piano or a synth section, or, those are all interchangeable. But
yeah, I think it's really cool because while like we are tied to the computers and we can't really perform without them, the way we have it set up gives us a flexibility to improvise like a normal band could while having the power that controlling Ableton allows you as a band. So I think it's a cool balance.
When you are playing guitar, are you looping with pedals, or are you sending it to Ableton and sending it over to Brennan to loop? Or how does that work?
I don't do I should probably do more looping. I don't do too much of it. But essentially what's happening when I do, I loop a little bit of bass guitar and sometimes a little bit of guitar. And what happens is it goes into my pedal board, into my amp modeling pedal thing, and then into Ableton. And from there, I can loop it on my push in Ableton. And that's all on my computer. So nothing gets sent, no audio gets sent back and forth between me and Brennan, but the clocks are synced. So anything we do live is all synced to the metronome.
Are you able to fade in and fade out both computers simultaneously? I don't know if that question is even clear.
I see what you're saying. I mean, not with one control, but we both kind of do it on cue. Like if we're ending a song,
you guys are on the same page.
Yeah.
That's like a performance part of it.
Yeah, we have we each have our rack of effects. So if a part is ending, we'll like both fade to gray at the same time, or like something like that.
Jake, what do you? How do you incorporate looping? Do you incorporate looping live? Obviously, there's so many repetitive beats.
No, I don't do any computer stuff at the moment. Right now I'm not even using a sample pad. So all the drums that I play live with Evanoff at this point are the acoustic kit. And there's, because we add a lot of electronic drum elements through the computers, and there's already that layer there. So I think there's something nice to just having the acoustic kit. And but like when it comes to production and doing that, I definitely do a lot of looping stuff there. Ideas.
Yeah, and usually there is some drum stuff overlaid on Jake's kit in the Ableton tracks. Yeah, a lot.
Gotcha. And then when you guys are on stage, and Jake, I'll start with you, but like, do you have a metronome click going, or how do you
every
sing?
song? Yeah, we all listen to a click. It's probably one of the most important things if you want to do acoustic computer music. If you want to play an instrument and play to a click, you have to. Because if you don't, it's going to sound like shit.
And not just the drummer.
No, exactly. It's important that everyone does that.
If you have the ability to have a metronome, you should be listening to the metronome. Is my opinion. Like, nice. I used to just rely on like Jake and Brennan and not have a click in my ear. But it's like, if you want to be really tight to the pocket, there's no reason you shouldn't all be listening to it.
Do you each have your own individual headphone mixes, or is it one?
Yep. We all have in-ear monitors.
And we can control those on our phones each show.
That's awesome.
It's really nice. It was probably the best investment we've made as a band.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That answers a question I like to ask about an investment that you've made. Okay, so we'll just use that one.
The X32 is a game changer for us. Not only were we able to run our own mixes, which means every night we're not doing the finger dance with the sound guy during a set, being like pointing at some element, pointing at some line, and then up and down. Like taking that out was huge. Also gave us the ability to multi-track at our live shows and at home. So now we just had like a mixing board with 32 inputs essentially. So I mean, sky's the limit to however much we could.
So the setup is the X32 with an S16 extension on it, and then we use a passive split. So basically, when we get to the show, the sound guy plugs our lines on stage into our passive split. The signal gets separated. So we get all the mix in our X32, and whatever we do does not affect what's sent to the front of house. So he just takes the cables out of the back of the passive split, plugs them into his stage box or whatever, and so they can mix as they please.
I see. And that passive split, is that all the input channels, or is it just a
All the
stereo
input
feed?
channels, all XLRs. Yeah.
Everything.
Okay. Oh,
So
that's
basically,
great.
it's like a
Yeah, I
24
love the X30
input.
too.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful mixer.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is. And one of the huge benefits of this as well
One of them
is not having monitors on stage will make your live mix and the sound guy's ability to like mix you well so much easier and so much cleaner, because you don't have monitors blasting into microphones, creating all these B frequencies and like masking and all this stuff. It's like it's a game changer.
The only stage
honestly.
volume is my drums. That is it. We don't use amps. We don't use any of that.
Well, good. That's a good point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because the clarity of sound is obviously very important for you to achieve, and to not have monitors blasting is a very helpful element that you're just subtracting out of the possibility of issues.
Absolutely.
And time.
So that's great.
Like monitor mixing when you get to a show can be pretty time consuming if the space is bad, and so having this.
And do you guys have like presets? For yourselves?
All the inputs are always the same every show. So once that's plugged in, we always have a general mix. So it's usually just a few levels that we'll have to tweak here and there depending on the room.
Tweak a little bit.
What microphones they're using. That really can change things on the kit.
And given your setup, you might have already mentioned it, so forgive me if you did. But where is the master clock? Because you mentioned that they're synchronized.
So one great thing is Ableton used to have that paradigm where there's a master clock and a slave clock, right?
Yeah, gone.
Outdated terms. And now we just have Ableton Link. So either one of us can actually push or pull the tempo in any direction, and the other computer snaps to it. Wow. 99.999% of the time.
Yeah, there's no more master-slave relationship. It's they coexist.
Interesting. Cool. Well, thanks for educating me.
Yeah. So that was a huge improvement. It's really cool.
Cool. And that's Ableton Live that does it.
Yep.
That way. When are you guys most creative? When you are individually or maybe together, but like when do you tend to write the most and come up with the most ideas?
Pass it around. Okay. For me, it's I guess there's two main times. Like I would say the primary time is like at night, after the day is done and like checked most of the things off my list, and I can kind of unplug, sit down here in the room and bang some ideas out, and then usually I can get inspired and stay up, well into the night if it's calling for me to. And then there's other times where you're just like walking down the street or like from room to room or in the shower or something, and like an idea comes into you and you just have to chase that a little bit. Like it's like something breathes into you, so you want to breathe it out in a way. So like you'll go and then write that down immediately, and those moments just come as they do, so you got to take advantage of them. But most of the time it's at night.
And when you write it down real fast, is that in like notation form, or when are you writing down lyrics? Or
most of the time it ends up being a voice memo on my phone.
Yeah.
And either I'm singing it into the phone, or I'll sing it and then go to the piano and play it, re-record that. And then if I'm really smart, I go ahead and set up Ableton and record everything in there, so I actually have it in a usable format later. But most of the time it's a voice memo.
I usually get my song ideas in my head when I'm on my morning walks around my neighborhood. It's pretty consistent. I just get these really kind of like already almost like song forms like built out in my head, and they're just playing on repeat, and then I kind of like speed walk home and then try to get to Logic and get it down on piano as quickly as possible, just to get the general ideas down so I don't lose that, because that is such a heartbreaking thing when like in your head you feel like you have a hit and then you don't get it down before it disappears. And I just can't imagine throughout history how many brilliant pieces of art have been lost to not like tangibly getting the idea down before it disappears.
It's some.
So that
No, you
go for
finish. Finish up, baby.
So, so that's definitely one of them when I'm on my morning walks or in the shower for sure. Sadly, or actually, I don't know, for better or worse, my ability to be creative is directly connected to my lifestyle and my health choices. So when I'm like eating poorly and drinking and partying and stuff like that, I don't write much. I don't never feel inspired to sit down and create. But when I'm like my routine is dialed in and I'm like eating healthy and working out, my head is just constantly full of melodies. So at least that's something I know I can control. But like, for example, when we're on the road, don't really think about writing too much because the lifestyle kind of takes over, and I don't really, I'm not in that headspace.
I mean, the way we tour too, it's a lot of work. We drive, and we
a lot,
and we set up everything, get all down, and time. So it's weird for me because I find that I can be the most creative when I have a lot on my plate, and part of it's like procrastinating doing those things. I find that I can get really creative in those moments of like high stress from other work loads, and this is like, okay, for some reason I can't work on this, but I know I need to do something, and my mind just starts firing away. That and like when I'm really consistent on it, it's usually later at night.
Sorry, if I can speak for Jake. Jake's hyper focus is something to be seen. It is incredible. I've seen this guy like after like nights on the road where we should not be awake anymore. Like we should be in bed. He'll like get a little snippet of an idea, maybe at like 6 p.m. and then it's like he's in the zone until like 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. sometimes. I feel like this guy can just go in, and it's really remarkable.
Yeah, it is a hyper
focus.
When there's something that I'm like, this is awesome, I'll sit down and 7 to 8 hours can pass without me realizing how long I've been sitting there. And there's that weird thing where it's like, I really got to go to the bathroom right now, but this is awesome. So I will hold it until the very last minute where it's like, no, I got to step away right now.
So what's your favorite part of that editing process, Jake? So when you are in the flow and are you adding layers? Are you working on fine-tuning the notes already there?
I find the flow comes from an idea, and then the unfolding of like that influencing the next idea or the next segment. And I find I can get more into a flow state when I'm starting something from scratch that I'm really excited about. The other work, the refinement details, that is more kind of a separate thing where I got a list of things I need to work on, and I'm going through and hyper focusing on just that element and then taking a step back. So it's kind of different states of focus.
And JJ, when you mentioned your routine is down and your health is high, I'll say, because I feel like health is a range.
For sure.
So when you're feeling healthy, you're feeling good, what are some of the important elements of that? You mentioned exercise, you mentioned your morning walk. What else is it that gets you in the right physical state of being?
This has been a process, but I've been dialing in my ideal morning routine for the past couple of years now. And it definitely ebbs and flows and what that looks like. But the core of it is basically waking up, doing yoga, meditating for about 15 minutes, going on a walk. And then I usually start my work day after those couple of things. Sometimes I'll throw in like 10 minutes of journaling in there. And then the other half of it, the more like dietary part, is like I take like greens and vitamins and stuff like that. And I restrict like my carbs and stuff. So my brain state is optimal when I'm in ketosis, but I'm not in ketosis all the time. So I usually just try to eat like a lot of vegetables and meats and stuff like that. And try not to drink too much. But I love drinking. Like, what I mean by that is I love cocktails, I love mezcal, I love wine. So I love the more artisanal side of getting into that stuff, which can be really fun, but can also break down my health routine. So that's a fun balance. But the core of it is some basic dietary guidelines, and then that morning yoga meditation walk routine is like, it gets me in the zone.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
So
I love it.
Another song. I want to transition back to your music so that way we can get through it. But Mala Strana. that one is a very interesting one, and I feel like it has such a rowdy intro that like right off the start, I feel like you're ready to like go. You know, it's a high energy rock in my estimation. You know, in my ear. But what do you guys think about it, and how did that one come to be?
I mean, that came from the same session when we were writing Singularity. But I think we must have been listening to a lot of Humphreys that day, or some other rock music that influences us. Yeah, the intro I think all came out of a jam, right? I think, and then later the beat part where it kind of develops into the drum and bass, and it's got that kind of rolling bass line. Like that was something that I've always wanted to recreate. I finally got this VST called Moto Bass, so it's a decent electric bass guitar emulator, and so we were jamming with that a bunch, and I was like, oh man, I've always wanted to do some kind of bass line like that. So I figured that out on keys, and that was pretty much like the engine for the drum and bass part of the jam, where it kind of takes off in the middle there. But I think the intro, right? The verse and chorus all came from a jam.
Yeah, I believe so. I think that riff was just something we started at the beginning of the rehearsal. Dun, and then, yeah, we were jamming on that for a while. I think it also
came from a stream.
And then I think we started...
Yeah, it was one of the streams that we had where we were playing around. I thought that's... Oh, it's tough to remember.
So to recap that, during the pandemic, we started a weekly live show called Evenings with Evanoff, where basically we would stream to Facebook, Twitch, a couple different streaming platforms, right, and gave the audience the chance to influence our jams or request songs, or we would have nights where we would improvise stuff and we would just ask people for kind of like topics for, what we should go for. So I don't know if somebody requested that or if somebody just wanted us to play some rock music, and that just kind of spurred from that. But I remembered, we had that jam on the live stream. People seemed to like it. We liked it. So we went back and listened to it, and we were like, we gotta put this thing into a real form, add a little bit more to it. Yeah, but I love the riff intro, and I love the chorus just with the classic, 3-chord turnaround and some cool rhythmic hits. It's a fun song.
And that song's cool because it kind of, we started out with the Humphreys rocky stuff, which we love, that kind of channeling that heavier side. But then we go into your kind of not typical, but kind of more jammy jam band breakdown thing, and use that as an opportunity to really like build over the course of 64-ish bars or whatever, into slowly crescendo and stuff like that. And I love that to then build up and then drop right back into the hook from the first chorus. I just love that song concept, like that song structure concept.
I think it's a very used concept of ours. You'll find that kind of structure in a lot of our work.
Hey, once you found it, man, you gotta.
I know, it's our sound.
Well, it's that middle ground between electronic composition and jam band composition, because we break down to those jammy parts that kind of ebb and flow for a while, but then we basically build like an electronic song would and drop back into the original motif of the song like an electronic song would. So I think that kind of defines our style in a nutshell. Is like, that is a hybrid composition between a jam band and like a electronic DJ.
And when you are increasing that tension or building over that 64 bar part, first of all, another artist called it a departure point, but that's how I heard it. It's like definitely like a transition point in that song where you go into that more jam style. But when you're building that tension over the long duration of 64 bars, what elements are you adding? What are you thinking about? How do you add that energy?
Ooh, I got one. I was going to say, other than adding, repetition builds tension. Like, that's like, we've seen that over and over in music, like especially house music, right? It's like one bar loop that slowly transforms, but is essentially the same throughout. And like that creates the sense of tension. So like having that, like some kind of like static part with maybe some deviation, some little fills and licks to like give the ear a break from listening to exactly the same thing, but having one element that's essentially the same throughout, and then just slowly transforming the other parts. So maybe the pads, you invert the chord that you're using, add an upper voice, or maybe you add a middle voice so it feels like a little beefier in the mid-range, and then everything else just Yeah, writing cool parts and then changing them a little bit as it goes, right? JJ, do you have anything else to say about like the guitar? How you thinking about those sections?
No, that's definitely, yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head for sure.
One thing I'll add about rhythm is I find when we build, it's often increasing the pace at like the subdivisions that you're hearing, slowly opening the hi-hat, and kind of quickness and pace. If you look at like a typical electronic build up the kick drum, right? Boom, 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 boom. That's a very easy way to create tension or create the sense that something is going to happen. Something new is going to come.
Nerds would call it rhythmic acceleration.
JJ, when you are building, it sounds like you're using some sort of distortion pedals and you're changing effects as the song progresses. And I feel like some of those effects are also adding to that energy. And I wonder how you think about some of those transitions, what those are and what the distortion is. And
Nice. Yeah, no, good on noticing that. So like, yes. Okay. So I have a Flashback X4 delay, which has like 3 delay presets. There's really never a moment in any of our shows or really any studio stuff where I don't have at least some delay on it. And so it's either usually always a short kind of little slapback, just to kind of, it almost in context sounds like a bit of reverb, just kind of beefs up the guitar a little bit. Or then I have my normal like solo delay, which is a pretty big, like pretty loud quarter note delay for solos. And I tap tempo that to whatever we're playing. And then I have my 16th note like ping pong thing. And so what you might be hearing is like in parts where we're jamming and then things get really big and I might go to like fanning or more rhythmic stuff and like building energy with my playing, I'll often turn that on and it makes the guitar just get like really, really big. And so in those moments where we're building energy before we like change sections or are building up to like a drop type of thing, I will use that to build energy. I also, another thing that I think is really fun, I use like pick scrapes a lot as transitional effects in different parts of songs. So kind of like an uplifter or riser would be used. I'll do that on my guitar to emphasize like a dramatic effect at transitions.
nice. And you're just scraping up the neck to create that rising.
Yeah.
Interesting. And because it sounds so abstract compared to like a guitar sound or like a traditional guitar sound.
Right.
And it gives that texture too. Now, what's your favorite? What are some of your favorite go-to distortion or pedals that you sounds that your signature?
So recently, I went completely digital. As I used to use an amp, and then I switched to using a couple computer plugins, and now I have it all outboard on my pedal board. It's a Line 6 Helix. So actually, they have an amp model of the old amp I used to use, which is a Hiwatt Custom 100, which is like a Class A like British tube amplifier. It's the one that David Gilmour uses and the one that Pete Townsend from The Who uses. So that's kind of the amp sound that I'm emulating. And then there's like a tube screamer style distortion on top of that. And that is kind of the entire foundation of my tone. So it's a Gibson into a Hiwatt emulation with like a tube screamer type effect with a lot of delay. Oh, and then I have Valhalla on my computer. Valhalla DSP, Valhalla Room, favorite reverb plugin I've ever seen, heard. And so I have about 10% mix on that on all my guitar settings as well.
I'll do a quick plug for Jake. So Jake's got this incredible solo project, bass music called Uma. Two O's. OOMAH. As many O's as you want. The oo can be as long as you want. Jake, I'm gonna keep vamping until you get your audio back. But it's a really, really cool, heavy psychedelic bass music. But yeah, I can't recommend it enough. It's one of my. I'm pretty picky when it comes to electronic music, and Jake's, without the bias of being a bandmate, is some of my favorite stuff.
Oh, that's good. Well, I appreciate the plug for him.
I could hear you. Some computer music. I really love Ableton, their whole stock stuff is pretty wonderful. I'm a big fan of FM synthesis, so a lot of what I do is an operator. FM frequency modulation stuff. You can get a lot of gritty tones. My favorite like sound design techniques are kind of sine wave compression techniques, bandpass filtering, that sort of stuff. And kind of taking clean tones, distorting them, resampling, doing randomization stuff, and resampling, then picking through that to find moments of sound that I think are creative or that just strike some sort of emotional feeling for me. But specific VSTs, I use Serum a lot for sure. I think that's, if anyone wants to learn digital synthesis, that's a great one. In way the GUI, the layout and everything, it's really visually adapt and good for understanding how an oscillator works, where the LFO works, how that's manipulating the sound. The Serum multiband compression I use a lot. All the Fab Filter plugins, Pro L, Pro Q, Saturn are really great. Also, shout out to the Minimal Audio guys. Rift is by far my favorite distortion plugin that's on the market, and it's like bipolar distortion. So the top of the waveform versus the bottom of the waveform can be affected differently. And I think they just did an absolutely wonderful job with that. They also just released Morph EQ, which is a great kind of EQ plugin that you can do all of these crazy automation and LFO things on the bands of the EQ and the way they work. So you can get a lot of really cool sound design moments. And then on like the mastering finalizing stages, Soothe is amazing for calming high frequencies, and that
That's good.
You still a big trash?
No.
You big trash guy, or are you using
trash,
Ozone?
Trash. One thing about trash
All
is
riff
it's
now?
just so CPU intensive. Like I found like I couldn't have a session full of it, whereas Rift is a lot less, and I honestly liked the controls in Rift a little better. I think they're easier to dial in, and they're not as surprising. Trash always, like when you add the convolution kind of stuff, which would create cool sounds, it would often be a little too much, and like to dial it back, like I don't know, it was fine. It was hard for me to find a middle ground with that, even though that was my go-to until Rift came out.
Well, thanks for sharing all those plugins and all the way through to the Soothe mastering phase. That's helpful and revealing. You definitely listed some that I haven't heard before, so that's cool. Sounds like it could be a deep, dark rabbit hole going through your list of plugins. I use a lot, but I like to repeat a lot of the stuff. I think there's so much option for play, but creating sound in the electronic space and creating something that's consistent requires to kind of use the same tools again and again. Repetition, you know. Cool. Well, a few other questions. First of all, what advice would you have for a young musician starting out today? Anybody can jump in.
Learn your business stuff. Learn how to market. Honestly, it is the biggest game changer. And so often, like, the general music business model, or like how people are brought up to think about it, is like you start playing some shows, you write some music, you try to build some buzz, and hopefully somebody will come along and then be your manager and then connect you with people and get you on a label and all that stuff. Total bullshit. Not the right way to go about stuff. Learn it yourself. Like, if you want to eventually find a good manager someday, you need to get to the point where you can build your following up to 20,000 Instagram followers or like 100,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. If you can't do the groundwork, nobody's going to want to work with you. Also, why put your business in somebody else's hands? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to pay that off? You should learn the skills yourself. Just take some courses and it'll change your entire career. Like, digital marketing is the most important thing for the modern musician, and all it takes is taking a simple online course.
If you want to do this professionally, you're going to wear so many more hats than just being a musician.
And learn to love it. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, that sucks, like I just want to work on music. Like, no, the modern creative has to be able to be a business person as well. Like, you're delusional if you don't think that. It just won't amount to anything if you don't know how to run your business.
Yeah, well said. So what were some of those key lessons that you learned in the course that you mentioned? And if you want to shout out to the course, feel free. But
yeah, I would highly recommend Indepreneur. Really great marketing courses, just helping you understand everything from the psychology of marketing and connecting with your fans, and understanding that the fan relationship, getting people from first hearing about you to coming to your shows and buying your merch and stuff, like, that is a human relationship, and you need to treat it like such in your marketing. And then everything from email marketing to advanced like retargeting and digital stuff, all the way to like how to build out funnels to sell merch and concert tickets and everything. So yeah, highly recommend those courses.
Yeah.
I guess the cool part too is just like, don't slack on it. Like, these fans, these are the people who are going to make you like actually let this be a career. You need to treat these people like you value that relationship. Like, you need to be engaging with them. You need to respond to every comment, every DM. Like, take it seriously. Like, if you want to build a successful career, you have to care about your community and your fan base.
And sorry, I made the joke that the music business stuff was boring, and like in some ways it's not as fun as playing drums, right? Or playing an instrument. But like that kind of shift in mindset of just like, I don't know, treat your fans like friends, like really appreciate them and respect them, then it's actually fun. It's more like, it's more social than it is business, if that makes sense. We're actually like through this whole process of hitting people up, messaging fans, like replying to comments. We've met like incredible people all across the country that I look forward to seeing when we hit the road. So if you do that, like there's more rewards than just, getting better gigs or whatever. It's like you actually make great friends and people who have like similar music taste and, like doing some of the same stuff. It's a cool opportunity if you put the work in.
When you are wearing so many different hats and you're managing yourselves and the social media and you're responding to everybody, how do you decide what to spend your time on and what not to spend your time on?
We tried a lot of things and we realized that, maybe this isn't the right path for us right now. And we'll dial that back. And then there's things that do work.
I'd say there's a couple of things you should always have in place, like regardless of like where you're at. You should have a system that's consistently bringing new people into your ecosystem, whether you're crushing on Spotify or whether that's through paid traffic and bringing new people into your world through ads and stuff like that. You need to have a system that is educating those new fans, whether that be retargeting ads or doing organic engagement and hitting everybody up who engaged with your stuff. And then you need to be getting people to buy your stuff. Like if you're trying to monetize your fan base, you need to be actively doing that. So you should be selling merch. You should be trying to sell tickets. So I think those three things should always be in place, and then everything else can build upon that. Yeah. But without that general funnel structure that is consistently growing your business on the back end, it's just going to go stagnant. Like touring is not enough to continue to build your fan base. That is such an archaic, outdated model to just tour for fans. Doesn't work.
There's just so much
for a long
content,
time.
Like most people stream music and you can listen to a new song every time you go onto that platform if you want. The thought of like someone buying an album and listening to that album for the next month, that's something that's kind of fading. And so part of me feels like our business, we're in the business of like building relationships and making people a part of our community. So whether they're listening to our music or not at that moment, they know we're there and they know that, we care. And that will allow them to come to our show. Hopefully they'll want to buy the merch. They'll want to support the brand, etc.
And sorry, if I could jump off a little bit, like all of this is being said and being like built upon the pillars of like the music is there. Like the music has got to be good and you have to have fun making the music. And like you really, and like having a practice of like letting yourself enjoy what you're doing, especially when there's all these other things in play, all the business stuff, like booking shows and content and crap like that. Like just being able to have a good time when you sit down at your instrument, every time is like the most important thing. So you have to already have that kind of built into you, that where you just love it, and that you would like the music alone can satiate you, because like for a few years you're not going to be making money off of this. Like you really have to love it. So holding on to that love, like keeping that relationship going with your instrument and with your bandmates and with the music itself, is all predicates this business stuff that we're talking about. I guess like what we're talking about now, it's like that shift when you go from, okay, I know I love this thing, I know I can't give it up, I would be miserable doing anything else probably, so how can I make this work? And then you start getting more serious about building a community and cherishing that a little bit more when it's more about other people than it is about you just having a good time with your buddies.
Because that's how it starts generally. You fall in love with music,
right? Yeah, it's got to.
there's a lot more that comes along with it if you want to take it into the serious realm. Or you want this to be your life.
Because I'm pretty sure somebody said this before. Maybe I'll be the first, but you're probably not going to make money in music, at first. Yeah. Heads up to anybody
Also,
who
on
loves
that
it.
note,
so you gotta love it. You can't make a business band and go for it. Like, it would be terrible. It'd be terrible. So you gotta love the tunes you're making and be excited about the next thing.
And also reinvest. Like, don't plan on taking profit. If you want your business to grow, just like any business in the world, like, you need capital to grow your business. So if you're not reinvesting your profits and you're splitting it up amongst your bandmates when you're making $500 a show, not a good idea. Put it back into the band. It'll make it go so much further. Like that $100 for you at that one point that you go and spend at the bar, it's better to put $500 back into the band and be able to gain a couple hundred new fans on your next release because you marketed it correctly. Like reinvest.
I've got another one on the note of reinvesting. If you're reinvesting everything back into the band, and if you're not taking home a cut from each show, you need to have a way to pay the bills. So I remembered when I was working a day job right after college, right? I met JJ at a party and got this opportunity to go on tour with the Evanoff guys. So I was like, yeah, that sounds great, but like, how am I gonna live? How am I gonna pay rent? I've got a couple more months left on my lease. And so I reached out to a couple of other musicians who are successful in Denver and realized so many of them were doing gig jobs, like Uber, Lyft, session work, maybe like picking up some live audio gigs, maybe they have other things like they're really good at photography or Photoshop, or you need to be able to find sources of income that are going to pay you well, and you have the skills for it. Like JJ was saying, just take some courses, learn something, and then get a job where you can get paid well for your time, so that the rest of your time you can kind of work for free, essentially, as you're building in this thing that hopefully long down the road we're getting paid way more than we deserve for just having a good time playing music.
Yeah, it's so important to find that balance. Obviously, you got to pay the bills every day or every month, whenever that bill is coming. Right. So it is important to think about that and to find that lifestyle that fits. But then, obviously, you got to go for the music, as you pointed out. You got to commit to it. And then there's that stage of you also now have to capture it and record it. You can't just jam forever, in my opinion. I mean, I guess you could, the Grateful Dead, but somebody recorded them, which is why we get to enjoy them now. Right. So it is important to make that jump to recording. So what have you each gotten better at saying no to?
I've been better at saying no to drugs and violence. The Dare shirts really worked on me. I never mix them two. It's one or the other. I think for me, like, there's this weird point. So talking about the gig work, right? Like at a certain point, I had to figure out what was like the most valuable use of my time and the most like fulfilling use of my time. So it was even a point where I had to like turn down opportunities to make money, which would be nice to have more money. But it's like once you can pay the bills with your gig work, it's like maybe not taking on all those extra jobs. Because your time and like the creative space, like for me, I'm the most creative, like I was saying, when everything's done off the list, when there's not something else to do, or vice versa. Like there's so much on the list to do that I just need to procrastinate my energy towards something else. But ideally, oh shoot, I've lost my point.
No.
Help me out here. Where were we?
Saying no to gig work.
Saying no to all the opportunities that you're gonna get, or to some of the opportunities that you're gonna get. There's one school of thought that say yes to everything, play as much as you can, make as much money as you can, but for your mental health and like if you want to keep loving the job, then put space in your calendar, like block out time for yourself where you're not gonna do something. You need like a couple days a month to like, go to the grocery store and hang out with friends and still maintain a life. So don't say yes to every gig, is what I'd recommend.
Yeah.
Nice.
Probably after parties, saying no to giving out free lessons too. I think that's a big one. A lot of people want to use my time, and I'll tell them it costs something, and they'll be like, "But I thought you were my friend." It's like, I am, but this is my profession, and I can't do this for you for free. I've worked so hard on this. And if you value it, then show me that you do.
Yeah, mine definitely comes down to like lifestyle stuff. Like I don't really party as much as I used to, or go out as much as I used to. Um, I feel really good when I'm making tangible progress towards like my goals and stuff. And I know like when I go out on the weekend, that's like a couple days gone for me because I know I'll feel like shit the next day. Then I'll eat crappy because of that, and the next day I'll be all foggy, and it'll take me to like that fourth day to get back into my flow of like at the state of mind where I'm like at my best, I guess, or yeah, my optimal state of mind. So yeah, compared to like when I was like 23, 24, I'm not as social as I used to be. I think it's because my values have changed quite a bit, and I am more intentional about the people I spend time around. So I think that is the main thing I say no to now. I'd much rather be alone working on music or hang out with my girlfriend than out
Unless
at some
it's
bar.
a mezcal bar. Jade is there.
Yeah.
Unless it's a mezcal bar.
And there is like
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but there is like a bit of like social pruning that I feel like you have to do as like a professional in the music industry, because there's so many people that are out there just to have a good time, or like that don't really want to. That sounds terrible saying, because if you're having fun making music, there's nothing wrong with that. But like for us, we want to grow past the local level. So like beware the pitfalls of like hanging out with people that maybe don't want the same thing that you do. And even if that means, like JJ was saying, like you have more alone time than you did a few years ago, like the trade-off is worth it. Even if you have to like call a buddy and say, hey, I haven't seen you in a year, but you're on my mind. Like if you're not seeing him every weekend, that is what it is, as long as you're able to spend all of your time working towards a goal that really makes you happy.
I think there's a real balance
Right.
here, especially going back to the like after party aspect of it. You know, if we play a city, right, and there's a a B market, right? Take Manchester, New Hampshire, for example. When we play there, the community is really strong and they love us, and there's definitely been a lot of value to show up at one of our fans' houses and hang out with them for a few hours, just to kind of deepen that connection and to deepen like the business of relationships. Like we do care about you and we want to show that, and there's time and place for it, because sometimes it's like, yeah, we're too tired. We have to focus on ourselves and say no, because if you want us to keep coming back, we have to take care. And then there's also the other aspect where it's like at like Electric Forest in 2016, the amount of crazy industry connections that I had at 6 a.m. is astounding. So it's like balance, you know?
Well, appreciate all of you sharing those various things, saying no to. But yeah, that Electric Forest 6 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, you never know when that next connection is going to come.
Yeah,
and when
Seriously.
the right place to be is. So, but you do have to definitely be conscious and prune and be aware of your time, and obviously get paid for your profession, as you brought up earlier. So for anybody listening who doesn't already know you, what are the best links and platforms that they should be aware of to stay up to date with your music and tour dates and merch, etc.?
Instagram,
Sign up for our email list.
evanoffmusic.com, Spotify. Yeah, actually, you know, like that seems like I know a lot of people say that, but if you are on our email list, which you can sign up on our website, or if you send us a message on Instagram, you will get early access to unreleased music before it comes out, and early access to tickets and merch. So we actually like do good things for the people on our email list.
Yeah.
It's not just a newsletter or some
We'll take
BS
care
that
of you, man.
most artists do.
That's great. Well, that's a unique approach, getting early access to the music. Have you guys been looking at the NFT space just out of curiosity and
We've
thinking
gone
about
back and
stuff in that area?
Oh
boy.
man, well,
Oh,
yeah.
boy.
I unearthed the
We
gold
had an
mine.
experience. Well, no. We don't hate
you
that
guys all
space.
hate
We
that
just had an
space?
experience
Yeah.
with the company that was doing it. I'm not going to mention the name just because I don't even want to bring them attention. Early on, that just
not
didn't work out. The space
Fizzled.
is super intriguing. It's just such a volatile kind of market, and the value and where people are at with it. It's so wishy-washy that it's definitely a thought that we are continuing to explore, but the methods in which we've been using in our digital space are working better for us now than I think putting the time into that would.
Yeah. So I'll say Jake is pretty well versed and much more involved in the NFT space than I think any of the rest of us are. But from my perspective in the backseat, I feel like it's kind of like the telephone when it first came out, and that the technology is cool and useful for certain things today, but it's going to develop and change into something that is probably unfathomable. Or maybe the people who are riding that wave can look into the future and they know where it's going. But I feel like most of us, our interpretation of what an NFT's value is now is going to be totally different in 25, 50, 75 years. It's not probably going to be JPEGs, with like you're buying art. I think it's going to morph into something different. So that being said, it's cool. It's cool now, but I don't think it is where it will be very shortly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely an evolving area. It seems like musicians and music itself is always at the forefront of technology with like Napster and various peer-to-peer things, and then pushing forward. And, musicians are pushing their computers to their limits too. As you mentioned, some of those plugins were bringing you down. So it is an interesting space, but I don't think monkeys on a JPEG are the pinnacle of the technology.
It's so funny.
But it sounds like what you guys are doing with the cool early access to music and some of the other things by being a part of the newsletter is interesting, and that almost sounds like a membership benefit, and that's what sparked off the NFT thought.
Yeah, true.
So
good point.
Something to consider there. But it is we're so early in that space, and it's a fun place to be. Yeah,
our email membership it's kind of like all the benefits of owning an NFT without having to explain it to your parents.
Or figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, or figure it out. True.
So you guys really put in a lot of effort towards it, and I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question is for you all, open-ended. Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
So yeah, head on over to evanoffmusic.com or hit us up on Instagram, and you can see where our pages are. Probably if you're seeing this now, our newest EP, Reflections, should be just about out of the oven or out on everywhere you stream music. It's a cover album that we've worked really hard on, meticulously recreating some different parts of our favorite songs, and then us kind of opening up and jamming on them, putting them in the Evanoff space a little bit more. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And then if I want to say to any new fans who have hung out this long, really appreciate you guys checking us out. And to anybody who's been with us for a bit and is tuning in, we love you guys, and we really mean it, and can't wait to hang and play for you again.
Yeah, for sure.
All of you, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here today, sharing yourselves, and how you come to formulate your process with all the different techniques of sound design and workflows. So it's cool to see three people work together so intricately, but create such a interesting product. So I'm really excited about the new album coming out, and thanks for your time today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate you, man.
It was a lot of fun.